What if I told you that for decades, some of the world's most advanced doctors believed a life-saving technique was reckless, until the day it brought a clinically dead patient back to life? The heart monitor is flat. The room is frozen in disbelief. Imagine a hospital room where the air is tense, and instead of warming the patient, doctors begin cooling them down, lowering body temperature toward the edge of biological silence. Feels backwards. Feels dangerous. Frost gathers along medical tubing. Vapor lingers above an unconscious patient. The monitor barely flickers as the body drifts into controlled hypothermia, suspended between life and death. Across Europe, Swedish medics study a controversial Russian hypothermic surgery technique, debating data, challenging assumptions, questioning whether calculated cold could outperform traditional rescue methods. Then comes the moment no one expected. The silent monitor spikes. Pulse returns. Shock turns to stunned relief as a clinically dead patient breathes again. And what remains is bigger than medicine. Hospital corridors caught between shadow and light, pride confronting proof, skepticism yielding to science, and the fragile line that separates death from life. The story begins in the shadow of the Cold War, inside Soviet laboratories where medical research remained hidden behind political walls. Scientists quietly studying radical ideas far from Western scrutiny. Soviet doctors experiment with therapeutic hypothermia, intentionally cooling the human body during critical trauma, early equipment humming in dim surgical rooms as vapor lingers in the chilled air. In theory, lowering body temperature slows cellular death, preserves brain function, and buys precious time during cardiac arrest. Life suspended as biology itself begins to decelerate. Meanwhile, in Sweden, physicians gather in bright, modern conference rooms, reviewing Russian data with cautious expressions, questioning whether such aggressive cooling could truly be safe. Cooling patients to near-freezing temperatures, inducing controlled clinical death. The operating room feels tense, the thermometer dropping as heart activity slows to a fragile trace. Extreme, dangerous, even unethical. For years, Swedish medical institutions demand proof. Research papers stacked high, debates stretching long into the night, leaving hypothermic surgery suspended between controversy and acceptance. Hypothermic surgery wasn't entirely new. In advanced operating rooms, doctors already understood that controlled extreme cold could protect the brain during delicate procedures, cooling equipment humming softly under sterile blue lights. But the Russian method went further. In severe trauma cases, surgeons lowered a patient's core temperature below 28 degrees Celsius, the monitor slowing as the body drifted toward a near standstill, vapor rising in the chilled air. Blood circulation reduced. Oxygen demand plummeted. Organs entered suspended animation, biology itself dimming, as if the human body were paused between seconds. Swedish medics pushed back, pointing to ECG charts filled with arrhythmias and warnings of clotting risks, arguing that such drastic cooling invited unpredictable and dangerous complications. And beneath the medical debate lay a deeper question. In split operating rooms divided between aggressive hypothermia and traditional resuscitation, how far should doctors go in manipulating the human body to cheat death? Everything changed when real-world emergencies forced the debate into the open. Late 1990s Scandinavian hospitals rushing cardiac arrest patients through snow-lined entrances, heart monitors flatlining as doctors fought against time. Even when hearts were restarted, brain scans revealed devastating neurological damage. ICU rooms filled with uneasy silence as physicians realized conventional treatment had limits they could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, reports from Russia described deep hypothermic protocols reviving patients after extended periods without a heartbeat. Surgeons reviewing case files under dim lights in facilities that felt distant and controversial. In Sweden, some researchers dismissed the claims as exaggerated, while others studied the data late into the night, computer screens glowing in dark labs as a quiet question lingered. Were they missing something critical? The turning point came during a tense international medical conference, where a Russian surgical team presented shocking case studies, slides glowing on a massive screen as the audience of doctors watched in stunned silence. They described patients with prolonged cardiac arrest, clinically dead by conventional standards, rapidly cooled, stabilized, and later resuscitated with preserved neurological function. Operating rooms filled with cold vapor and flickering monitors. The room was divided. Some physicians whispered about breakthrough science, while others crossed their arms and called it reckless experimentation, demanding peer-reviewed trials and strict standardized protocols. Yet as isolated success stories accumulated across Eastern Europe, skepticism slowly gave way to cautious curiosity, until Swedish researchers chose to test the principles themselves under tighter monitoring and controlled clinical environments. Early Swedish trials were cautious. In modern ICUs, doctors implemented controlled therapeutic cooling after cardiac arrest, carefully applying cooling systems while maintaining strict clinical oversight rather than plunging patients into extreme hypothermia. They monitored everything: brain activity flickering across EEG screens, oxygen saturation levels, clotting factors, and cardiac rhythm. Rows of machines glowing as physicians tracked each subtle change in real time. The results were striking. Patients cooled within hours of resuscitation showed significantly better neurological outcomes. Brain swelling decreased, and survival rates improved. The data no longer theoretical but measurable and undeniable. What had once been dismissed as dangerous now looked promising. Yet in quiet conference rooms, one question lingered over temperature charts dropping lower and lower. Should they go further, toward the deeper levels of hypothermia pioneered by Russian teams? Then came the case that would redefine the debate. A middle-aged patient collapsing from sudden cardiac arrest, paramedics rushing him through hospital doors as monitors showed no pulse and traditional resuscitation efforts failed to restore stable circulation. The prognosis was grim. Faced with a critical choice, Swedish physicians chose to act cautiously but boldly, initiating deeper hypothermic intervention, aggressively cooling the patient while advanced life support systems maintained minimal circulation in a tense, blue-lit operating room. Hours passed in heavy silence. The operating room felt suspended in time, machines humming softly as the team waited, eyes fixed on a monitor showing only fragile, uncertain signals. Then, against expectations, the heart resumed an organized rhythm. Days later, neurological assessments revealed something extraordinary. The patient awake, responsive, retaining significant cognitive function. News of the case spread rapidly through Sweden's medical community. Conference rooms filling with debate as skeptics demanded detailed data and supporters called it long-awaited validation. More cases followed. Not every attempt succeeded, but patterns began to emerge. Early cooling, precise temperature control, and coordinated teamwork steadily improving survival odds in severe cardiac arrest cases. Swedish researchers compiled their findings, drafting peer-reviewed papers and publishing results that supported structured therapeutic hypothermia protocols, as international medical journals began taking notice. What once felt like a clash between East and West slowly evolved into shared scientific progress. Russian innovation and Swedish clinical rigor converging into a unified advancement in life-saving medicine. Behind the scenes, technological improvements transformed the procedure. Advanced cooling blankets wrapped around patients, intravascular cooling catheters precisely regulating core temperature, and refined monitoring equipment glowing steadily in modern ICUs. Unlike earlier decades, doctors could now lower body temperature with exact precision and gradually rewarm patients to prevent shock. Digital displays tracing smooth cooling and rewarming curves in real time. Swedish engineers worked side by side with medical teams, refining devices, analyzing performance data, and perfecting systems that once seemed experimental but were rapidly becoming reliable. Intensive care units developed clear protocols, specific temperature targets, defined cooling durations, structured rewarming schedules, marking the moment the technique matured from bold experimentation into evidence-based medicine. The ethical questions never fully disappeared. Inside dim ICU rooms, patients cooled to the brink of biological shutdown while doctors stood watch, aware that even controlled hypothermia still carried real risks. In quiet consultation rooms, families struggled to understand why their loved ones were being made colder instead of warmer, confusion and fear written across their faces as physicians explained the reasoning. Medical teams spoke clearly and calmly. Hypothermia was not surrender. It was strategy, a deliberate effort to buy precious time for the brain while machines and monitors worked in careful coordination. As awareness grew, trust followed. Survivors walking out of hospitals with intact memory and steady movement became living proof that the once controversial approach truly had merit. Over time, Global medical organizations began formally acknowledging the benefits of therapeutic hypothermia after cardiac arrest. International conferences updating treatment guidelines as the once controversial method entered mainstream acceptance. Sweden, once skeptical, emerged as a leader in refining post-resuscitation care protocols. Advanced hospitals training medical teams to use controlled cooling as a standardized tool in carefully selected cases. Russian pioneers who had once been dismissed were gradually recognized for pushing boundaries others hesitated to explore. Their early work re-examined under the light of validated results. The rivalry transformed into respect, as collaboration replaced confrontation. Science accomplishing what politics could not, quietly building bridges across borders. Perhaps the most powerful impact was neurological preservation. Brain scans revealing sustained neural activity where once there would have been irreversible damage. Doctors studying the images with cautious hope. For decades, surviving cardiac arrest often meant severe brain impairment. But with hypothermic intervention, patients now stood a far better chance of returning to normal life, awake, responsive, and cognitively intact. Families regained parents. Children regained mothers. Hospital corridors filled with emotional reunions, as loved ones embraced survivors who could speak, remember, and walk again. Medicine's ultimate goal is not merely to restart a heart, but to preserve a life worth living. Hypothermia, once feared, now acting like a shield protecting the brain during its most vulnerable hours. Yet researchers continue refining the technique. Inside modern labs, scientists study temperature curves and patient data, asking difficult questions. How cold is too cold? How long should cooling last, and which patients benefit most? What began as a controversial Soviet-era practice has evolved into a globally studied therapy. The journey from aging analog equipment to advanced digital ICUs reflecting decades of accumulated evidence. Sweden's early challenge was never obstruction but a demand for proof. And that demand strengthened the science, as international collaboration now fuels innovation far faster than rivalry ever could. Looking back, the story reveals something deeper than medical progress. Inside quiet conference rooms where doubt and discovery shared the same table, skepticism paired with open-minded investigation sharpened innovation rather than stopping it. Swedish medics did not accept the Russian technique blindly. In advanced ICUs they tested it, measured it, refined it, carefully monitoring every variable as data replaced assumption. And in doing so, they transformed a risky concept into a life-saving standard, the tension between doubt and discovery forging stronger medicine that ultimately benefited everyone. So the next time you hear that a stopped heart means the end, remember the operating rooms where doctors chose to cool instead of warm. Blue-lit theaters filled with tension as machines hummed and a faint heartbeat fought its way back to life. Remember the debates that pushed science forward. Conference halls divided between doubt and belief. Research data glowing on massive screens as controversy forged breakthrough. And remember the patients who opened their eyes after being written off as lost. Hospital rooms once cold now warmed by sunlight. Families embracing survivors as proof that the impossible can become reality.